In the summer of 1943, the Eastern Front trembled with anticipation. After the disaster at Stalingrad, Hitler needed a victory to restore the myth of German invincibility. His eyes turned to a massive bulge in the Soviet lines near the city of Kursk. Here, a salient stretched 150 miles into German-held territory. To Hitler, it was an irresistible target, a place where his armies could surround and annihilate the Red Army once more. Operation Citadel was born. What followed would become the largest tank battle in history, a clash of steel and fire that would decide the future of the Eastern Front. For months, both sides prepared. The Germans assembled nearly 800,000 men, 10,000 guns, and over 2,700 tanks, including the fearsome Tiger and the brand new Panther. These machines were marvels of engineering, boasting thick armor and devastating cannons. Hitler believed their superiority would crush Soviet defenses. But the Soviets knew the attack was coming. Thanks to brilliant intelligence work, including information leaked by British codebreakers, Stalin was warned of the German plan. Instead of striking first, he ordered his generals, Zhukov, Rokossovsky, and Vatutin, to dig in. And dig in they did. The Red Army transformed the Kursk salient into a fortress. Thousands of miles of trenches, bunkers, minefields, and anti-tank obstacles stretched across the countryside. Over 1 million mines were buried, so many that German engineers joked they would need months just to clear them. Soviet gunners prepared kill zones where advancing tanks would be funneled into deadly ambushes. When the Germans finally attacked, they would not find a weak spot. They would find a trap. On July 5, 1943, the storm broke. German artillery thundered across the front, followed by waves of tanks grinding forward under a blazing summer sun. At first, the Wehrmacht made progress. The Tigers and Panthers crushed Soviet defenses in their path, shrugging off shells that bounced harmlessly off their armor. Villages burned, fields churned to mud beneath tank treads. Yet for every mile gained, the Germans paid in blood and steel. Soviet anti-tank guns tore through their ranks. Mines crippled vehicles before they even reached the front lines. And from above, swarms of Soviet aircraft contested the skies, dueling with the Luftwaffe in massive dogfights. Day after day, the Germans pushed deeper, determined to pinch off the salient from north and south. The fighting was relentless, grinding, merciless. On the northern front, General Model's 9th Army slammed against Rokossovsky's defenses, but every advance slowed, then stalled. In the south, General Hoth's 4th Panzer Army, with the elite Tausender SS Panzer Corps, clawed forward against Vatutin's lines. Here, the battle turned into a slugging match of unimaginable ferocity. One German soldier later recalled, "The earth shook as if the world was ending. The air was filled with smoke and dust, and everywhere tanks burned like torches." The Soviets threw wave after wave of men and machines into the fight, determined to bleed the enemy dry. For Hitler, this was supposed to be a swift strike. Instead, it became a war of attrition he could not afford. The climax came near a small village called Prokhorovka. On July 12th, the steppe became a cauldron of fire. Over 1,000 tanks and self-propelled guns clashed in the largest single armored engagement the world has ever seen. The fields roared with the thunder of engines, the crack of cannons, and the screams of men trapped inside burning steel. Tanks collided at point-blank range, firing until their barrels glowed red. Dust and smoke turned daylight into twilight, while the ground was littered with twisted wrecks. Curious details emerged from this chaos. Some Soviet T-34 crews, realizing their guns could not penetrate the front armor of German Tigers, rammed their tanks directly into the enemy, sacrificing themselves to disable the behemoths. Others charged headlong, closing the distance so that their shells could punch through weaker side armor. German tank aces claimed dozens of kills in a single day, but for every Tiger that roared, dozens of Soviet machines swarmed like wolves, overwhelming even the mightiest predators. By the end of Prokhorovka, the battlefield was a graveyard of steel. Nearly 400 Soviet tanks lay destroyed, but the German spearhead had been blunted. The mighty SS Panzer Corps, once considered unstoppable, was battered and bleeding. And across the front, the German offensive ground to a halt. By mid-July, it was clear. Operation Citadel had failed. The Germans had thrown everything into the Kursk salient, and still the Red Army stood unbroken. What had been planned as a decisive strike had become a colossal drain of men, fuel, and machines. Then came the Soviet counterblow. Even as German forces reeled from Prokhorovka, Stalin unleashed Operation Kutuzov in the north and Operation Polkovodets-Rumyantsev in the south. Waves of fresh Soviet divisions backed by swarms of T-34s surged forward. The exhausted Wehrmacht, their tanks worn down, their supply lines stretched, now found themselves on the defensive. For the first time in the war, it was not the Germans dictating the tempo, but the Red Army. The German dream of regaining the initiative on the Eastern Front died at Kursk. Hitler himself admitted bitterly, "The enemy's defenses are deeper than any we have ever seen." On July 17th, he called off Operation Citadel. The order was a silent admission of defeat. Kursk was not merely a failed offensive, it was the end of the German ability to launch any large-scale attack in the east. From this point onward, the Wehrmacht would retreat, step by bloody step, all the way back to Berlin. For the Soviets, Kursk was a triumph of preparation and sacrifice. They had endured unimaginable losses, tens of thousands dead, thousands of tanks reduced to smoldering wrecks. But they had achieved what Stalingrad had begun, the shift of momentum. The Red Army had not only survived a German onslaught, it had turned it back and seized the initiative for good. The battlefield itself told the story. For miles around Prokhorovka, fields were strewn with burnt-out hulks of tanks, their blackened shells standing like tombstones in the grass. Villagers who returned after the battle said the land smelled of fuel and death for months. Even today, farmers still unearth rusted steel and shattered bones from beneath the soil. Curiously, despite the catastrophic losses, many German commanders claimed victory in their reports, citing the sheer number of Soviet tanks destroyed. But numbers could not hide the truth. The Wehrmacht had failed in its objective, and in the east, failure meant disaster. The Soviets, with their endless reserves and growing confidence, now pressed westward with unstoppable momentum. The Battle of Kursk was more than the largest tank battle in history. It was the moment the German war machine broke. Stalingrad had been the first crack. Kursk was the shattering blow. From then on, the Red Army would never stop advancing until its banners flew over the Reichstag. When we remember Kursk, we remember not only the clash of thousands of tanks, but also the endurance of the men inside them. Soldiers who fought in suffocating heat, trapped in metal coffins, knowing that one hit could turn their world into fire. Men who faced minefields, artillery barrages, and storms of steel, yet still drove forward into the maelstrom. Kursk was the roar of engines, the scream of shells, the thunder of history turning. It was the battle where Germany's last hope of victory on the Eastern Front was extinguished, and where the Red Army began its relentless march to ultimate victory.